WLBT, celebrating Black History Month, is sponsored by Martin & Martin Attorneys and Counselors, Hope Credit Union, and Patty Peck Honda.
This year marks 60 years since the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was signed into law.
Yeah, its goal was to prevent racial discrimination in voting. This was passed due to many African Americans being denied their right to vote.
Our Quentin Smith speaks with someone who was on the front lines helping Black people register to vote.
And he sheds light on this legislation and its impact then and now.
For MacArthur Cotton, exercising his right to vote is something he takes very seriously. Back in the 60s, not many African Americans were registered to vote. In fact, many were beaten and even killed for trying to do so. However, Cotton didn't let that stop him. He was willing to put his life on the line just to make sure those who looked like him were allowed to vote just like everyone else.
I wanted to be free. And you can't want to be free and not accept the responsibility.
For MacArthur Cotton, that responsibility was trying to register African Americans to vote.
And common sense that we knew that we could lose a life, but we could lose our lives. At that time, just happened to be walking down the street.
Although the task of getting people registered to vote sounded and seemed simple, it actually came with a lot of dangers. See, African Americans were attacked verbally and physically whenever they tried to exercise their right to vote.
People wasn't voting because there was, under terror. We were living under state-sponsored terror. Most of the people that we were around, they knew somebody who had been lynched or something.
Cotton says his parents were two of the few African Americans who were registered voters. So, quite naturally, he wanted to make sure he and his peers were also registered as well. That's why it was a no-brainer for him when civil rights activist Bob Moses asked him to be a part of his voter registration project in 1961. Still a student at Tougaloo College, he joined the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, also known as SNCC. Cotton set out and was determined to bring about change.
I wouldn't volunteer to give my life, don't get me wrong, but that was secondary. That was the second thought. The thought was, how do I get out of this situation?
He and 3 others were assigned to the southwestern part of the state. They held workshops and trainings to educate African Americans on everything they needed to know to prepare themselves for registering at the courthouse. The process started out slow. They only managed to get 20 people registered that year. Many people who were a part of the project were beaten and even killed. Cotton says many people were paralyzed by the fear of what could happen to them.
If we go on the vote, we'll take them out behind the house and whip them before election day. This public, this not private. They was out there talking that kind of talk.
But, he says, those fear tactics also pushed African Americans to band together. They continued protesting and continued demanding civil and equal rights. That persistence prompted President Lyndon B. Johnson to sign the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It removed race-based restrictions on voting. And although it was a pivotal moment, Cotton says it still wasn't the victory he wanted to see.
Basically, that was another piece of paper. But when somebody don't follow the law, what good is another law do?
The civil rights activist says it wasn't until the 70s when the mass of African Americans became registered voters. Though he was critical of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, Cotton is even more critical of where things stand with that legislation now.
They've been chipping and taking it back. Others, they ain't bothered about it. But they've been taking that Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act back every year. Let's chop a little bit off.
The 82-year-old believes what happens next in this country depends on the outcome of people voting. Now, more than ever, he says, so many rights and key pieces of legislation depend on who people elect. That's why he's encouraging the younger generation to continue exercising their right to vote, a right he doesn't want them to take for granted.
There's no intention of for us to have any rights in this country. Now, just like I was always taught, it's up to us to, make sure that that doesn't prevail.
Now, along with leading voter registration drives, Cotton was also a freedom rider and helped with the Algebra Project in the Delta, advocating for quality public education for all students. Quentin Smith, 3 on your side.